Hello friends, good afternoon and welcome to the EduSat Network. Our topic of discussion today, friends, is Russia's policy towards Central Asia. And friends, to take this topic further, to illuminate it and throw more light on it, we have with us in our studio subject expert Dr. Rajan Kumar, Assistant Professor, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. And with this introduction, I welcome sir to the studio and also request him to begin our today's lecture.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you friends, good afternoon, and in the series of discussion that we are having about various parts of the world, today I thought, let me talk about Russia, Central Asia, partly because, Russia, as you know, the Central Asia has been part of Soviet Union, and even before that it was a part of the Tsarist Empire. Central Asia gradually started integrating towards integrating with the Tsarist Empire in the 19th century. And later on it became part of Soviet Union in the 20th century, and in 21st century, as you know, that after 1991 these states are independent states. And when I refer to Central Asia, let me tell you some of the countries, not some of the countries, all the countries of Central Asia, because sometimes there is confusion that some other countries are also included in Central Asia. Central Asia basically covers, one is Turkmenistan, second is Kazakhstan, third is Kyrgyzstan, and then you have Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. So these are the 5 Soviet Central Asian states, and they were the part of the Soviet Union earlier. Now all of them are independent states, but broadly many of the scholars would also like to include countries like Mongolia, countries like Afghanistan as part of Central Asia. But today when I talk about Russia's policy towards Central Asia, the countries which I'll cover today are primarily the Soviet states, the countries of Central Asia which were part of Soviet Union, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. These are the states that I'll cover, and I'll also focus on Afghanistan, basically 6 states, 5 states of Soviet Central Asia plus 1 which is Afghanistan. So I'll cover 6 states today, and I'll show you the map, also the countries which will be covered in this discussion today. But let me tell you that before Soviet Union, during the Tsarist period, the Tsarist Empire which ruled Russia right since 16th century and earlier also. So in the 19th century, Russia started invading towards Central Asian states, and in 1865, 19th century, 1865, Tashkent was annexed by Russia, and later on the Khanates which were like Bukhara, Samarkand, etc. In just after a few years in 1968 and onwards, they became part of the Tsarist Empire. So these Central Asian states have a very long history of association with Russia. That was also the cause of great game, the historical great game between the British Empire and the Russian Empire. When British wanted to influence the policy of Afghanistan, and Russia also wanted to have a control over of Afghanistan's foreign policy. Finally, as you know, that Afghanistan worked more like a buffer state between the 2 empires, British Empire in India and the Tsarist Empire in Russia. So I'll start from there, but my focus today would be primarily the post-Soviet Central Asian states. What are the imperatives and what are the major determinants of Russia's policy towards Central Asia? What are the major Russian interests in Central Asia? So I'll start with this a map. If you can see the map here, so it covers the Eurasian Union. Eurasian Union is an organization which is being promoted by Russia. It's basically very similar to European Union, but it's very small in size in terms of economic size or in terms of population, etc. But the basic idea is to have a single market for the Eurasian countries. And as you can see in the map here, so the Central Asian states are this Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and on the top you have Kazakhstan. So these are the major Soviet Central Asian states, and towards the bottom you can see Afghanistan. Afghanistan is also treated as part of Central Asia by many of the Western scholars, but the problem is that Afghanistan is also a part of SAARC. SAARC, as you know, is the South Asian regional organization, where South Asian countries are the members of SAARC. So Afghanistan has a more or less dual identity. On the one hand, Afghanistan is a part of SAARC, but some of the scholars also treat Afghanistan as part of Central Asia. So these are the broader, and that's the broader economic and geographical space that I'll be talking about today. And when I talk of Russia's interest in Central Asia, I must tell you that there are certain major factors which influence Russia's policy towards Central Asia. First and foremost is the issue of security, because these are the neighboring states, and any kind of instability in this region might impact the security in Russia. And Russia, as you know, that Russia during the Soviet Union, a lot of Russian people they decided to settle in Central Asia, and many of the Central Asian states even today they have a huge Russian minority population. And if I give you the figure, Kazakhstan has the largest Russian minority. It has more than 20%, nearly 23% of Kazakhstan population in Kazakhstan is the Russian minority. So that's one issue. But in other Central Asian states also you have a huge Russian minority, ranging from 5 to 7% in other Central Asian states. And more than that, what defines Russia's relation with Central Asia today is the broader economic independence that emerged during the Soviet times, but that continues to define the relationship between Russia and Central Asia. Energy is a very important factor, because many of the Central Asian states are energy rich. They have very high hydrocarbon resources, the gas and oil. And the major countries, Kazakhstan is one of the major producers of oil in Central Asia. Turkmenistan is one of the largest producer of gas in the world. Then the oil and gas are also in Uzbekistan. So during the Soviet period, the pipeline which used to carry the gas from Central Asia to the European countries, that passed through the Russian territory. So pipeline is one thing which cannot be built in a short time. The construction takes a long time, and once you have the pipeline, it's very difficult to create or to build an alternative pipeline. As a result, the gas supply of many of these states, even today, the route is through Russia. For instance, Turkmenistan's gas was primarily passing through the Russian state. But now Turkmenistan is also trying to diversify its relationship in terms of energy supplies. Now it has developed a pipeline with China, and we'll talk about it in a minute. And Turkmenistan is also planning to develop a pipeline with India. This is known as TAPI. Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. And when Prime Minister Modi of India visited Turkmenistan just a few months back, so the TAPI pipeline was again discussed, and they tried to expedite this construction of pipeline. The only problem with this TAPI pipeline is that it passes through the difficult terrain of Afghanistan and Pakistan. But anyway, I'll come back to that in the later slides. But for the time being, I must tell you some of the other issues which define Russia's relation with Central Asia. The Russia has also promoted the regional organizations in the form of Eurasian Economic Union and Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So these are the two broader economic. One is the economic organization, and the second one is the security organization. So that is another way of connecting with Central Asian states. Again, the Northern Distribution Network, which passes from Latvia and through Russia to Central Asia, and almost touches Afghanistan. So that is very important, because this network, the road network, was also used by NATO for its supplies from the Western European countries. And in the security threat, what Russia faces is the Islamic threat, Islamic fundamentalism, which might destabilize the Central Asian states, and which in a way will have its impact on the neighboring territories of Russia, neighboring regions in Russia, like Chechnya and Dagestan, which is already where Russia is already facing the threat of secessionism and also terrorism. So as a result, the three other threats which Russia faces, or which Russia fears that any kind of instability might have an impact on Russia. These major threats are termed as this fundamentalism, extremism, and terrorism. So, because the Central Asian states are Islamic states, although these states are by and large secular states, but there are certain indications that some kind of Wahhabi Islam is also having its hold in some of the Central Asian states today, especially Uzbekistan and some parts of Tajikistan. So, another issue which is important for Russia is the issue of drug trafficking. Drug trafficking, what happens that because Afghanistan is not a stable state, and in Afghanistan many of the economy is not very sustainable. It does not have very sustainable economic development due to the war and the Taliban and other factors. So as a result, many of the farmers in Afghanistan, they are involved in opium production, and what is happening is that through the route of Central Asia, opium is passing to Russia. And that is having a huge impact on the youth population of Russia. So these are the broader issues which define the relationship of Russia with Central Asia, apart from the geopolitical issues where Russia would like to counter the increasing influence of United States and China. China is having huge economic investment, and China is also having energy networks with Central Asian states. So as a result, what is happening, Russia is fearing that the kind of hegemonic condition that it had in the Soviet period and also in the 1990s, so that is being eroded because of the presence of American forces in Central Asia, primarily in Afghanistan, and also because of the growing Chinese economic influence in Central Asian states. But I'll start with the security, then I'll come to economic and other issues. In the security issues, what defines the relationship between Russia and Central Asia is the issue of instability or the fear. Russia always fears that these states, Central Asian states, are not very stable states because of the two reasons. Because many of the states are still authoritarian in terms of political regime, and for instance, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, they are being ruled by the very old person. Karimov is the president in Uzbekistan, and Nazarbayev is the president in Kazakhstan. And it is feared that once these rulers are replaced by other rulers, so that might lead to some kind of ethnic clash or instability in these two states. Tajikistan is not stable again, because Tajikistan, as you know, had a civil war in early 1990s, and that civil war led to thousands of people were killed in the civil war. And also Kyrgyzstan is a very weak state. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are the two weakest states of Central Asia, and in Kyrgyzstan there was a trouble in 2010. Earlier there was a color revolution in Kyrgyzstan, which is known as the Tulip Revolution, and this color revolution was promoted by the NGOs who were funded by United States and the Western European countries. And Russia fears that United States and the Western European countries, they might promote a regime change in the Central Asian states, and any kind of regime might jeopardize the influence of Russia in Central Asia. Turkmenistan, the fifth state in Central Asia, is a very weak state, and is not economically weak state, but it's a very close state. Turkmenistan is a middle income group kind of country, but it's a very close state, and it's not open to the outside world as the other countries in Central Asia are. It's a very closed regime, although it has a very close economic relationship with Russia, but Turkmenistan is not the member of many of the organizations like Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's also not the member of CSTO, which is the military organization promoted by Russia. So there is a fear that Turkmenistan might come under the influence of China or United States or even Turkey for that matter. So these are the broader geopolitical factors which influence Russia's policy towards Central Asia. Then the US forces, the US forces and NATO forces are there in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, as you know, after 9/11, the U.S. intervention took place after 9/11, the bombing at the WTO towers, at the World Trade Center towers, World Trade Center towers, which were attacked, and after that, the U.S. intervention took place in Afghanistan, and after that, NATO forces are there. There is a fear that when NATO forces withdraw from Afghanistan completely, then it might lead to instability in Afghanistan, which will have its impact on the bordering state of Tajikistan and also other states. So Afghanistan is again very important for Russia because of the political factor and also because of security reasons and the drug trafficking. The three major factors in Afghanistan. Three major factors which influence Russia's policy towards Afghanistan. One is the security because of the Taliban regimes, etc. Second is the drug trafficking, because as I told you, that drug is produced in Afghanistan and then through Central Asia it goes to Russia. And third is the US presence in Afghanistan, and also US had bases in Kyrgyzstan, and earlier US had forces in Uzbekistan. Now they do not have, the United States does not have forces in these two Central Asian states, but even now nearly 15,000 soldiers or a little less than that probably are there in Afghanistan, and US presence is taken as a threat for Russia. The mindset that Russia has, and especially after the crisis in Ukraine and Georgia, crisis was 2008, and Ukraine crisis was in 2014. So after that, there is always a fear that US might try to influence the politics and the foreign policy of these states, and increasing US influence might lead to kind of erosion of the Russian influence in Central Asian states. So that is the broader Russian policy towards Afghanistan. Minority issues, as I told you, that in Kazakhstan it has the biggest minority, 23%. But the Russian minority is also there in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and also some of the people are there in Uzbekistan. So that's an issue for Russia, because it's a Russian minority, and sometimes these states, Central Asian states, they try to change the official language policy. And that has led to resentment among the Russian minority in Kazakhstan and also in many of the Central Asian states. Then minority issue is also leading to some kind of enhanced migration of the younger population from Central Asian states to Russia. The younger population from Kazakhstan and other states also, they tend to migrate to Russia for jobs and education primarily, and that is leading to at one place is leading to some kind of closer integration, but this is also creating some kind of tension and conflict between Russia and Central Asia at times. So the three evils which are known as terrorism, separatism, and secessionism. These are the major threats emanating from Central Asia, and if you see the policies of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they have clearly identified the three evils which they need to counter for the stability in this region and also for stability in Russia and China, because these are the two states which might be impacted in case there is any escalation of terrorism or separatism in Central Asia. Add to this drug trafficking, and the major security issues are complete in terms of Russian policy towards Central Asia. Now, if I talk of the broader geopolitics or the great game which defines the Russian policy towards Central Asia, first of course is the US factor. The US was not a major player either during the Soviet period or even in the 1990s. The Central Asian states were not very important for US in the earlier period, but after that, what started happening after the 9/11 attack, that US wanted the supply route. As you know that all the Central Asian states are landlocked states, they do not have direct access to sea route. So the supplies to Afghanistan, which America wanted to for reinforcement of the military supplies, so that was not possible unless and until the Central Asian states agreed to provide the military bases or agreed to provide a road and rail network for supplies to Afghanistan. The second factor which influences Russian policy towards Central Asia is the China factor. Chinese influence is growing. Chinese influence is growing throughout the world, but Chinese influence is growing much more in Central Asia, partly because of the proximity that China has with the Central Asian states. The western province of China, which is known as Xinjiang province, so where the Islamic population is there, and that province is connected to Kazakhstan, and there is a fear that in case there is instability in Central Asia, that might lead to escalation of tension in the Xinjiang province as well. So that is another fact, that is the security factor which influences Chinese policy towards Central Asia. China is investing heavily in Central Asia because of the energy resources which are there in Central Asia. China has developed a pipeline, the oil pipeline with Kazakhstan, and China has also developed the gas pipeline with Turkmenistan, and I'll show you, I'll discuss in detail again in the slides to come. The other countries which are very active in Central Asia, apart from United States and China, are Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, and India. So these are the other major secondary states which are very active in Central Asia. Turkey, because Turkey has a closer historical proximity with the Central Eastern states. The language, Turkish language, as you know, that is also, if you know the Turkish language, you can easily understand the language of Turkmenistan. You can also easily understand the language of Kazakh and other states in Central Asia. So Turkey has a historical linkages, and also Turkey is not self-sufficient in its energy supplies. So Turkey would like to have a closer energy and economic relationship with the Central Asian states, and also Islam, because of the religion. There is some kind of ideological proximity of Turkey with Central Asian states, and that also provides an alternative avenue for Central Asian states, because Russia has been the dominant power historically, and Russia is likely to be the dominant power in the years to come. But Central Asian states are also looking for some kind of economic alternatives through which it does not have to depend upon Russia for its economic supplies. As a result, Central Asian states are having a closer, trying to develop closer relationship with Turkey. Is also trying to develop a closer relationship with China. So these are the methods of diversification of economic trade with the alternative regions, and China has emerged very important, and Turkey is again some of the pipelines, the planned and some of the operational pipelines are through Turkey. So that gives a kind of leeway for the Central Asian states, that in case there is some kind of tension with Russia, so they can find some alternative routes through Turkey. So Turkey is again an important part. India, I'll talk. India, I'll give you the details, the Indian interest and motives in Central Asia. The regime change, which has been promoted by United States and the other Western European countries through NGOs, and that has impacted the relationship of Central Asian states with the Western states. Tulip Revolution, as you know, that when it happened in 2005 in Kyrgyzstan, so Tulip Revolution basically was a regime change, which was facilitated, which was supported by the Soros Foundation or the other NGOs which were funded by the United States and the other Western countries. So they wanted to have a regime change. They wanted to have a regime which is friendly to the United States and other countries in the Western Europe. Unfortunately, that did not work, and very soon, the regime which emerged in Kyrgyzstan, that regime was very close to Russia rather than to the Western European countries or to United States. Arab Spring, which started in 2014 and 13 and 14, where Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon and other places were affected by this. So there is also a fear among the leadership Central Asian state that kind of protest or the demonstration might take place in Central Asia, and since these states are by and large authoritarian states of different variety, of course, not at the same level, but there is a fear that in case there is some protest like Arab Spring or the popular protest that might kind of threaten the regime in the Central Asian states, that can also lead to some kind of instability in the Central Asian states, and there are some instances of protest in these states. Kyrgyzstan already in 2010 it was facing a huge political protest. Uzbekistan also, there is a fear that when Karimov does not remain the ruler, and when the regime passes to some other ruler, that might lead to instability in Uzbekistan. Kazakhstan is economically stable, but politically again, after some time it's very likely that regime change, not regime change, but once Nazarbayev, who is very old, once he sees when he does not remain the ruler, so that might lead to some kind of instability in Kazakhstan as well. Migration is another issue that plays a kind of that plays a role in defining Central Asian countries' relationship with Russia. Even today, if you know that most of the Russian people, most of the Central Asian younger people, they would like to migrate to Russia because of course the economic reasons. Central Asian, many of the states like Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are very poor states in terms of resources. They do not have hydrocarbon resources. Their main resources are the water resources. They are rich in water resources, but they do not have other rich resources. They are poor state. As a result, most of the younger people from Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are migrating. They would like to migrate to Russia for work, and in fact, the remittances which are sent from the workers in Tajikistan, and that constitutes a very high percentage of Tajik GDP, and it's nearly more than 45% of Tajik GDP. So you can imagine the kind of interdependence that Tajikistan has with Russia. Kyrgyzstan also, the people are migrating to Russia. In fact, the reason why I argue that Russia will remain an important power in Central Asia is also because of this factor of migration. No European country, for instance, or not United States, will allow the workers from Central Asia to migrate to one of their countries. Even during the refugee crisis, they do not allow the people from these states to migrate to either Europe or to United States. But the people in Central Asia, they have very easy access to Russia. Many of the countries have dual citizenship policy, and also the migration policies are not very strict for the Central Asian people in Russia. So as a result, if you see, and there is a direct train and the road link between Russia and Central Asia. So as a result, you will see that a lot of younger people are always migrating from Tajikistan to Russia. So, and that migration is not possible either with the United States, or that's also not possible with the China. And that's the reason I argue that the kind of place that Russia has with the Central Asian states, that cannot be replaced by either China or United States. Also, the linguistic and cultural affinity that Russia has with Central Asian states, that is something which is very unique, and that cannot be replaced either by China or by United States, for the simple reason that most of the people, a majority of population in most of the Central Asian states today, they do have the knowledge of they can understand and speak the Russian language. That's of course because of the historical reasons, but the fact that there is some kind of historical, there's some kind of linguistic understanding, so that also plays a role in terms of additional integration of the space. And in many of the states of Central Asia today, of course, except Afghanistan, which was never a part of the Soviet Empire, so except Afghanistan, these states of Central Asia, they share a historical, linguistic, and cultural affinity with Russia, and that leads to some kind of psychological integration of Central Asian people with Russia. The TV serials and TV programs of Russia are very popular in the Central Asian states, and that also leads to what is known in the international politics as the soft power. While United States and China, they have to create some kind of soft power in Central Asia, but by default, Russia has a soft power, or Russia has the influence in Central Asia through its soft power mechanism. And also there is an additional convergence of value system between the Central Asian states and Russia. the fact that these states talk of sovereign democracy, where they would not like to have any interference from the outside powers, and Russia would also not like to have any kind of interference with the outside powers. So that leads to some kind of ideological or ideational convergence of ideas. All the states are, as I told you, the authoritarian or semi-authoritarian states. So as a result, they share some kind of political affinity with Russia, because Russia would support these kind of regimes, while US would like to change these regimes. So as a result, Uzbekistan, which is otherwise not very close to Russia in terms of either military alliance or in terms of the psychological alliances, but in fact Uzbekistan would like to project itself as the major power in Central Asia, and that sometimes clashes with the Russian interest in Central Asia. But because of these reasons, the migration and linguistic and the fact that the political regime is very similar to the political regime that we have in Russia, so that leads to some kind of ideational convergence of the values, which is anti-Western by nature. So all these states are they are much more closer to Russia than they are to the Western states in the world. Now I'll come back to some of the economic issues between Russia and Central Asia. Among the economic issues, please note that these states are by and large interdependent on Russia, and I'll show you the figure how the trade relationship is very high, how the states in terms of export and import, how the states are very, very closely integrated with Russia. Then energy pipeline, that even now all the states have energy pipeline through Russia. And now they have created the Eurasian Union, where Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, along with Armenia, Russia and Belarus, they are the part of the Eurasian Union. It has created a single market, a single economic space where there is a free movement of people and trade. And please know that 7 lakh Kyrgyz workers send nearly $200 billion as remittances to Central Asia. And if we take into account the contribution of remittances to Central Asian economy, so remittances from Tajikistan, Tajik workers constitute nearly 45% of the GDP of Tajikistan. So imagine imagine the importance of these remittances, or importance of Russian remittances to Tajik economy, which is nearly 50%. The 50% of the remittances, 50% of the Tajik GDP. And next is, if you see Kyrgyzstan, for example, then 27% of the Kyrgyzstan's GDP is contributed by remittances, which are sent back by the Kyrgyz workers who are working in various parts of Russia, and 13% of Uzbek GDP is contributed by the Uzbek workers who are working in Russia, and they send the money back to their country through this various methods of remittances. If I show you the figure that shows how this is the figure by IMF, and I must take credit I must give credit to IMF for this picture. This is not my picture. So here, if you see the figure, then China and Russia, how Chinese trade is growing and how Russian trade is growing in Central Asia. You can see the blue line on the top. So that is the way Chinese trade has been growing from 2001 till 2013. And if you see, then it was less than it was just about $1 billion in 2001, and within 15 years, China has a trade volume of with Central Asian states amounting to nearly $50 billion. It's a little less than that, but nearly $50 billion. So just imagine the kind of influence the growing influence that China has in Central Asia. On the other hand, if you see the red line is the Russian trade with Central Asia. So it started with less than $10 billion. It went up to nearly 27 in 2007-8, and then it went down further because of the financial crisis that Russia had in 2007-8 onwards, and then again it has gone to more than $30 billion at the moment. So this is the kind of comparative influence of Russia and China in Central Asia. If I have to give you the figure, then Uzbekistan's 50% of commodity export is with Russia, and it's 25% of this import in Uzbekistan is coming from Russia. So that's the kind of the economic integration or economic interdependence which is there between Uzbekistan and Russia. So for 50% is very high. 50% of export goes to Uzbek export goes to Russia. So that's very high, and 25% of imports comes from Russia to Uzbekistan. What I mean is that of the total Uzbek export and import, 50% goes to Russia, and of the total Uzbek import, 25% comes from Russia. So that's the kind of interdependence that Uzbekistan has with Russia, and this is the figure of 2010. Kazakhstan, on the other hand, if I have to give you the figure, Kazakhstan 30% of export, 30% of its total export is with Russia, and 43% of its total import is from Russia. So Kazakhstan, as you know, as you can see with the figure, so it's again very closely linked to Russia. 13% of its export and 43% of its import is with Russia. Turkmenistan exports with Russia is nearly 28% of its total export. This again 2010 figure, and energy constitutes the major chunk of Russia-Central Asia trade, and this constitutes nearly 30% of its trade with Central Asia, total trade between Russia and Central Asia. But there are certain regional variations. When I talk of Russia's policy towards Central Asia, then there are certain regional variations. Kazakhstan is most important due to economic reasons and also minority reasons, and Kazakhstan is part of the Eurasian Union. So Kazakhstan is the most important country for Russia in Central Asia, and also Kazakhstan shares the largest border with Russia. So because of that reason, Kazakhstan is very, very important for Russia. But Kazakhstan is also trying to diversify its relationship with other countries, for instance, United States and China. And Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are important primarily because of the defense and security reasons. These are the weak states, but Tajikistan is bordering Afghanistan, and there is a fear that instability in Afghanistan will impact Tajikistan, and that will have an adverse impact on Russia as well. Kyrgyzstan has been politically not so stable, although now some kind of democracy is evolving there. But even then, there is a fear that that political regimes are not very stable in Kyrgyzstan. Uzbekistan is important because of security and economic reasons. Uzbekistan, because the regime there is, in case there is some kind of a regime change in Uzbekistan, so that might impact Russia's policy towards Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan has also been trying to play Russia against the United States, and at times it plays US against Russia. So because of that, that has led to some kind of political tensions between Russia and Uzbekistan. Turkmenistan now it is trying to develop a pipeline with China. Not develop actually. Turkmenistan has already developed a pipeline, a gas pipeline with China, and Russia fears that since Russia was the traditional route for the supply of energy or supply of gas from Central Asia to Europe. So now because of the diversification, there is a fear that Turkmenistan might try to develop some alternative routes which might impact the traditional influence that Russia had in Turkmenistan. Russia also has military bases in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. So because of security reasons, Afghanistan factor, because of the US factor, so Russia would like to have its military bases in these regions. Now, some of the regional organizations which are being developed in Central Asia. So Shanghai Cooperation Organization is probably the most important. Shanghai, as you know, the term has come from one of the cities in China, which is Shanghai. So it was promoted by China. It has evolved from Shanghai 5 of 1996 to Regional Security Organization in 2001. The initial motive of this organization was to resolve the border disputes between China and Central Asian states, but later this focus shifted to other issues, and the three evils that it has recognized are the issues of separatism, terrorism, and extremism. So these are the major issues which impact Russia, China, and Central Asian states. So they focus on these states, and they are also having military trainings, military exercises together. But Shanghai Cooperation Organization is very asymmetrical in terms of its power distribution. Unlike European Union or ASEAN, this organization is, on the one hand you have a very powerful country like China and Russia, and on the other hand you have very, very weak states like Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. So there is a broader asymmetry in terms of economic and military power among the Shanghai Cooperation Organization members. And again, the norms and the decisions are taken by consensus rather than the enforcement mechanism, and it's more like the voluntary acceptance of the norms adopted by Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And Shanghai Cooperation Organization has led to, at least the one contribution that it has made in terms of resolving the border dispute is that it amicably resolved the border tensions between Central Asian states and China. And as a result, the kind of fear that was there in the early 1990s that some kind of border conflict might erupt between Central Asian states and China on the one hand, and Central Asia and Russia on the other. So that has not happened. So that's one of the major contributions of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India, Mongolia, Iran, Pakistan, they were the observers of. They had the observer status in SCO, but recently, this year only, India and Pakistan have been offered the membership of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and by next year, it's very likely that India will become the member of Shanghai Cooperation, like Pakistan. So both of them are likely to be the member by next year. Another organization which is important is the CSTO. CSTO is the Collective Security Treaty Organization. It has emerged from Collective Security Treaty. Again, it was signed. Collective Security Treaty was signed between the Commonwealth of Independent States in 1992, and basically, again, it was a mechanism to resolve some of the border and other issues between the newly independent states of Russia and Central Asia. But later on, it has become, in 2002, it has become a security organization. So it's known as Collective Security Treaty Organization. It's basically a military organization. Some of the time people call it that this is more like a Warsaw Pact, or this is more like NATO, where there is a military alliance between the member states. The members are Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. So these are the members. And when I use the term collective security, and the way it's understood that attack on any one of these member states will be considered a collective attack on the other country. So in case there is an attack on Armenia, for instance, so that will be considered an attack on Russia, and Russia will come to the rescue of Armenia. So that's what we mean by collective security organization. NATO is also a collective security organization where any attack on NATO members would be considered attack on the entire NATO. So similar is the case with CSTO. Eurasian Economic Union, it consists of Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan, and it came into existence in 2015. But earlier there were it was known, or there are other. It evolved from it evolved from Customs Union, which was the earlier kind of integration that was taking place, and later on it became Eurasian Economic Community. So the Eurasian Economic Union has evolved over the time from Customs Union and Eurasian Economic Community that existed earlier. Basically, the idea is to integrate the single market with free movements of goods, services, and people. Eurasian Economic Union basically, in the broader perspective of Russia, Russia considers three important regions which are very important. One is Europe, second is China, and third is Eurasian economic space. These are the three broad regions for Russia, which are very important for its foreign policy motives. As a result, it is trying to create an economic space which would be similar to what we have in the form of European Union. So that's the economic plan of Russia towards these countries, and other members of Central Asia can also join and are free to join this Eurasian economic space. Although Uzbekistan at the moment is unlikely to join it, this Turkmenistan is also not very keen on joining Eurasian economic space, and Tajik economy is very weak to become a member of this Eurasian Economic Union. But kind of political alliance that Russia has with Tajikistan, it's very likely that at some point of time Tajikistan may want to join Eurasian economic space. Now, briefly, because the Central Asian states are no longer the backyards or backyards of Russia. Now it has other powers which are very active, and I'll just give you a brief account of how China is active. China is trying to develop this maritime Silk Road and economic belt. This maritime Silk Road and economic belt, basically, the maritime Silk Road passes from through the Indian Ocean, it touches this Myanmar, Bangladesh, goes down to Sri Lanka, then goes up to Pakistan in Gwadar port, and from there it connects to Central Asia and other states. And it has also is also planning to develop the roadways and the railways which will connect which will connect China with Central Asia, which will connect China with Afghanistan, which will also connect China with Pakistan. And China is investing heavily in Central Asia. China's trade with Central Asia was just $1 billion in 2000. In 2010, it went up to $30 billion, and by 2013, it reached up to $50 billion. And we can safely argue that China has replaced Russia in terms of economic influence on Central Asia. So, and that is one thing. While Russia and China are having a closer alliance today, Russia and China, they have signed they've signed a deal of nearly $400 billion, which is a huge deal, and they're having a very close now military exchanges also. Russia is trying to be, after Ukraine crisis, Russia had a conflict with the Western European country. It was almost like some kind of new Cold War which emerged between the Western countries and Russia. So as a result, China started looking towards the east. So it's trying to have a closer economic alliance with China and other countries in the east, including Japan, Korea, and India also. So although Russia is having a closer alliance with China broadly in terms of economic and political integration, but China is also feared by Russia because they fear that the increasing Chinese influence in Central Asia will have an adverse impact on the Russian influence in Central Asia. So it's kind of competition and cooperation between Russia and China in Central Asia. China has developed a oil pipeline from Kazakhstan and a gas pipeline from Turkmenistan, and by the end of 2015, it will supply nearly 15 billion cubic meters of gas, which is nearly 20% of China's gas. So you can imagine the kind of importance that Central Asia is also having for Chinese energy requirements. China has given a loan of $13 billion to Kazakhstan and $8 billion to Turkmenistan, because China has slush of money. China has huge funds surplus, so is willing to give loans to these countries, and as a result, Chinese influence is growing in Central Asia quite fast. In Tajikistan, 41% of the external debt is from China. So you can imagine the impact of China on Tajikistan in terms of economic debt. Now, how is Russia trying to counter US in Central Asia? Through Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it asked United States to withdraw its forces from Central Asia. US has sought to develop this alternative pipeline from Caucasus to Europe, and US, because US was promoting regime change in Central Asia, so that is feared by Central Asian regimes as well as Russia. So US was asked by Central Asian states to withdraw, and finally, the kind of bases that US had in Kyrgyzstan, the name of the base was Manas base. So US had to withdraw from Manas, and US also had to withdraw from Uzbekistan after SU asked the United States to withdraw its forces from Central Asia. Now, I must refer to some of the Indian interest in Central Asia and how that's coping up with the Russian broader politics in Central Asia. India is not a hostile country to Russia. India, in fact, shares a very close relations with Russia. Russia is probably the closest friend that India has in the world. So India's interest in Central Asia are primarily energy and security. Energy, because these states, Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, they have very rich energy resources. India also applied for this. India is bidding for a kind of energy in a oil field in Kazakhstan. The name was Kashagan, and but India lost to China in the bidding, and that created a kind of tension between India and Kazakhstan. But very recently, Prime Minister visited all the 5 Soviet Central Asian states, and they have signed a number of deals, and which is likely to have a very positive impact on India and Central Asian relation. TAPI is another project that I discussed earlier. That TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. So TAPI is one project which was in pipeline for a number of years, but till now still at the stage of this planning, and though no concrete developments have taken place. But if US was supporting this pipeline, partly because it will diversify Turkmenistan, because earlier that the idea was that India might develop a gas pipeline with Iran. So that time there was a conflict between US and Iran, and the nuclear deal which has been signed between US and Iran had not taken place. So US was against any kind of pipeline between India and Iran, and as a result US started promoting an alternative pipeline in the form of TAPI. The only problem with the TAPI is that the route is through Afghanistan and Pakistan, and you can imagine the kind of the instability which is there in Afghanistan as well as Pakistan, and there is a fear that Taliban might create problems in Afghanistan, and Pakistan regime is not very conducive for this kind of agreement. Although the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, has agreed to finance the part of the pipeline, but even now the concrete developments have not taken place. In fact, if I have to give you a comparative picture of India's presence in Central Asia, I told you that China has nearly investment of more than $40 billion in Central Asia. Compare that with just $1 billion investment of India in Central Asia, Soviet Central Asia. India has invested nearly $2 billion in Afghanistan, and in Afghanistan it has a very good presence, but the present regime in Afghanistan is not very conducive to India, and it is trying to develop a closer relationship with China rather than with India. So that's the kind of broader geopolitics which is emerging in this region. And but Modi's visit in the last Prime Minister Modi's visit to Central Asian states, that created a very positive atmosphere in the Central Asian states, and India is planning to develop what is known as the North-South corridor, where there'll be a pipeline from, not a pipeline, there'll be the route would be from Mumbai to Chabahar port in Iran, which would be through the sea route, and from there India is supporting the road and the railway links from that from Chabad to Astrakhan in Russia, and from there to the European countries. So that's the route being promoted by India in through Iran in Central Asia. And India is also trying to invest in Central Asia. I mean, the companies TCS and this ONGC Videsh, they are quite active in Central Asia, and Central Asia is also one of the major importers of pharmaceuticals from India. So these are the broader issues which are there between India and Central Asia. Finally, coming to the conclusion that American and Chinese presence has eroded the hegemonic position of Russia in Central Asia. There is an increasing influence of China in Central Asia, and primarily because of the economic investment and trade that China has with these states. But Central Asian states are becoming much more assertive in terms of asserting their autonomy and asserting the autonomy of the foreign policy. So it's not that they are completely subordinate to any one country, either Russia, China, or United States. And finally, Central Asia has a very close economic, psychological, and cultural integration with Russia. So it's not very easy for China and United States to make the inroads in Central Asia. Economic influence might be there, but these kind of influences, they take a long time, and as a result, the Russia will continue to play a very important role in Central Asia in at least 2 decades to come. Thank you. With this, I come to the conclusion of my presentation. I hope you liked it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I am sure that the students would have definitely liked it, and of course it was extremely informative and useful also in the present context. So thank you so much, sir, for that, and thank you viewers for watching us. Have a wonderful day ahead.